you fix it? Okay. Asian carp. How do Asian carp harm the fishing industry through the Mississippi River and the Great Lakes? Presented by the Green Group. Next slide, please. The problem. Brought to the U.S. in the 1960s from different parts of Asia in order to benefit farmers, Asian carp are an invasive species of fish that can ravage the biodiversity of water ecosystems due to their ability to reproduce quickly and their lack of natural predators. To the right is a photo of a typical Asian carp that can be found in the Mississippi River. This invasive species of fish can also obliterate the amount of resources in a body of water because they are constantly eating. Sabria Khan, a student at Berkeley Law, says this about Asian carp eating habits. As filter feeders, the Asian carp have evolved to consume plankton continuously while swimming, allowing both species to eat between 20 and 120% of their body mass daily. Consequently, the silver carp can weigh up to 60 pounds, while bighead carp can weigh up to 100 pounds, and both species of fish can measure up to 5 feet in length. Asian carp have harmed many species in the Mississippi River and also threaten the Great Lakes. Next slide, please. The fishing industry. Asian carp are threatening the Great Lakes, which fisheries generate about $7 billion annually. This is a massive amount of money that just can't be ignored. Due to the fish consuming a massive amount of resources, other species of fish populations are also greatly threatened. The National Invasive Species Information Center states this about the Asian carp problem. The bighead carp and silver carp, collectively known as big-headed carp, could be capable of establishing populations in Saginaw Bay, Lake Huron, and affecting the health of ecologically and economically important fish species such as the yellow perch. Next slide, please.
Our first solution was to block off waterways to prevent Asian carp from entering certain bodies of water. This is a tried and true solution, which is evident from the electric barrier between the Chicago area waterway system and the Great Lakes. On the screen is a graph, and on the graph there is green dots which represent Asian carp occurrences before 2012, and the red triangles represent occurrences from 2012 through 2014. And as you can see, the water of the Great Lakes, there's hardly any green dots or red triangles because the Chicago area waterway system implemented their electric barrier in 2002, and it has been very effective in keeping out the Asian carp, which is evident from the graph. So some pros and cons to solution one began with the first pro being that it keeps the carp out where they are unwanted, and only 2 Asian carp have been found beyond the electric barrier of the Chicago area waterway system, with millions of pounds being found in front of it, which proves this point. The second pro, like I said earlier, is that this is a tried and true solution, again, evident from the Chicago area waterway system and the Brandon Road and Lock Dam, which have both kept Asian carp out of the Great Lakes. However, the first con to this solution is that it is very costly. For example, the Brandon Road Lock and Dam costs $830 million for both state and federal government, according to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And the second con is that these barriers may already be too late, as the urgency to build Brandon Road Lock and Dam was undermined by water samples beyond it testing positive for Asian carp, according to GreatLakesNow.org. So some limitations and implications of the first solution is that it will disconnect bodies of water, which in turn will limit trade and transport on such bodies of water. And also, it will only be affordable by governments and large corporations, but at the same time, these are the only people that should be doing things such as blocking off waterways. So overall, this is a realistic solution, which is again evident from the Chicago area waterway system's electric barrier and the Brandon Road and Lock Dam.
Well, what was our second solution? Our second solution was to fish and farm Asian carp in order to sustain economic profit and to use that money to help the cause of supporting the government. Mark Morgan from the University of Missouri supports this when he states that less than 15% of respondents had eaten carp, but nearly 53% were willing to try. Marketing should focus on the benefits of consumption while downplaying any possible concerns. Although education programs are worthwhile, taste might be more influential to change public attitudes towards Asian carp. Next slide, please. As you can see in the graph, as Asian carp have become more of an issue due to them being an invasive species in Kentucky and moving through the Mississippi River, more people have resorted to farming and fishing them, which has brought more money towards the fishing industry. Now, if we use them as our main fish of the fishing industry, then we'd be able to sustain the economic profit and keep it the same. But what fish could it replace? Next slide, please. As you can see on the graph, the number of trout has been decreased through the years, and this can be due to climate change or to the Asian carp itself. However, this shows that if the trout is decreasing, we can use Asian carp to replace it as the #1 fish used by the fishing industry in the United States. Next slide, please. So what are some pros and cons of the solution? One pro is that it helps to get rid of Asian carp by farming and fishing it out of the rivers. And another pro is that it provides an economical profit for the fishing industry as they have a new line of food as the main source. Mark Areno from Christian Science Monitor supports this when he states that Two Rivers Fisheries says it plans to invest $2.5 million in building the fishery in Wickliffe, Kentucky, a city located about 2 miles south of the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. One of the cons, though, is that it destroys the old fishing industry because of the prey fish that the Asian carp rely on and the Asian carp eating up the environment. And this causes some of the fish to go extinct in the US. And the other con is that it still has an environmental impact the same as before. Even though we're getting rid of Asian carp, this doesn't help them from spreading to other areas such as the Great Lakes, which is why they will probably eat up more of the environment and still have the same environmental impact. Next slide, please. So what are some limitations and implications of the solution? Well, the first limitation is that Asian carp may not be a popular dish among the people. Whether it's due to the taste, how it looks, or just not liking the fish itself, Asian carp not being a popular dish will cost the fishing industry some money loss. And the other limitation is that it still harms the ecosystem at the same rate. As I said before, when the Asian carp spreads to different areas such as the Great Lakes, it will still harm the ecosystem at the same rate by eating more of the food and hunting on the prey fish, which still causes the ecosystem to be harmed. Next slide. And the implication is that it takes out the old fishing industry and starts a new fishing industry based on carp. Sarah Verbal of Southern Illinois University states that most respondents would be willing to try a free sample of Asian carp and would be willing to pay for it. Because of the negative connotation attached to carp in general, this figure is encouraging. Because of people advertising carp as bad and being able to market them as a solution to eat, most people would be willing to buy an Asian carp taco, burrito, chorizo, and be willing to buy it. Next slide.
Now to compare the two. Which one is better? Solution 1, which is blocking off waterways, or Solution 2, which is eating the Asian carp? To start, Solution 1, blocking off waterways, is only affordable by using government money and funding. It must be approved by the state and county legislation, and it would need more materials, which Solution 2 almost has none required. Solution 2 has less required, does not need anything extra since you would simply be making food, and could already have the required things since it was already partially implemented in states such as Kansas and Missouri. Sadly, it's more of a suggestion than a physical plan such as Solution 1, and it would be, to make it into a better plan, it would increase the amount of food and industries that use the fish. And it's also harder to force the people to eat the food because they may have a different taste than required. So which one is better? Next slide, please. Solution 2 is the better choice. It's more cost efficient, easier to start, and keep the economy the same with Asian carp as the main source rather than damaging it by zapping Asian carp and other fish. As said, if we used Asian carp, we would not only have to get rid of the threats of ruining other fish industries and other fishing economies, it would be a much safer choice in the long run in regarding economics and other solutions. Next slide, please. In conclusion, Asian carp are hurting the fishing industry as an invasive species. They reproduce too fast and have too few natural predators, which changes the ecosystem of fish within lakes and rivers that the Asian carp inhabit in the United States. There's solutions to this problem, of course. Waterways can be blocked off, or the consumption rate of Asian carp can be raised. There are limitations to these solutions, such as disconnecting water sources or the fish not being popular. These problems can be circumvented, which will solve any other problems that can arise. Thank you for listening. Next slide.
Terrific. Thanks, guys. Let's see, you guys appear on my screen with Chaz at the top, and then let's see, I think Fisher's right below him. And then Julian, you're at the bottom, so Kurt, that makes you third down. So that's the order in which you guys will do questions. So let's start with Chaz. Okay, Chaz, how did the group decide to include or exclude Julian's research from the overall presentation? Like, what part did Julian play in what you guys just presented?
Well, one way that Julian was included in the presentation was that his lens was environmental, and he was about strictly preventing Asian carp from moving into the Great Lakes. And his argument was that we could use electric barriers as a way to stop the Asian carp from moving on to the Great Lakes. And we included that in our solution one, and he provided the limitations and implications of the solution as well.
Terrific. Fisher, you're next. So what would you say of the other three guys in the group? Did any of them provide kind of a significant or an important argument that you guys excluded from your final report? And if so, why did that get excluded?
One of the arguments that we probably should have or could have brought up would be ethical, because when I was reviewing the research, I noticed that a lot of the fishing stats we brought up was simply about economy and the political status, but it didn't think much about the actual fish itself. And we kind of neglected the fact that although we are trying to save the economy, we are ruining the fishing and trout business itself, which would be not a ethical or moral solution.
Okay, good. And then let's see, I think Kurt, you're the third one. What's a way in which your team solution made you think differently about your individual research and your research report? Do you think differently about it now than you did before you gave the presentation?
Yes, our resolution was that eating the Asian carp would be the better choice, which I never even thought about in my paper. Most of my solutions were either block off the waterways or get government help, but I never thought about actually eating the carp, which seemed like a simple solution that just went over my head. And I think that's it.
Okay, terrific. And then finally, Julian, you'll get the last question. If you guys had one more team member, right? So suppose you had a group of 5. What area do you think you guys neglected or at least didn't look into that might have been helpful for your final presentation? What would that 5th person have looked into?
So if we had a 5th person, we would have had them look into the historical aspect of Asian carp, because at the beginning, Kurt stated that they came here in the 1960s from the U.S. government, exporting them over here. And we kind of skipped to like the present day or 2012, 2014 when I pointed them out in my graph. And I think we could have had a bit of a better argument if we were to incorporate the time from the 1960s when they came here to the present day and kind of talked about how the problem evolved over time and got worse, instead of just simply stating how bad it is right now.